Hi there. So, moving on into our next section of material, section 1.4, it's about graphs and graphing utilities. So it seemed reasonable to show you how those graphing utilities work rather than record myself at a whiteboard kind of talking through this stuff. So there's three main graphing utilities I'll expect us to use over the course of Math 210. The first of them you're seeing on your screen right now. It's an online graphing tool called Desmos. You may recall I used this in talking about that vertical line test when dealing with functions. So today I actually wanted to take a moment and look at how actually to use Desmos rather than just generating some graphs real quick. So if you're following along with the notes file, there's a particular setup that we're asked to sketch a graph of a particular function. So the Desmos tool is pretty handy on this front, so you can basically just kind of type it in exactly as it looks, and it'll actually kind of take care of the formatting for you. Like I've mentioned in class or in previous videos, we do want to enclose the top and the bottom of this fraction that appears, where we have 5x plus 2 over something. So 5x plus 2 in parentheses, that way it does the order of operations right. Hit the slash for division, and it actually generates the fraction. So that's kind of cool. Whoops, don't want a capital letter. Yeah, Desmos doesn't really work with capital letters. I think it's X and Y pretty much cover it. And if you need to move out, you can just kind of use the arrow keys to navigate over. So you're at the back if you needed to put something else onto this. All right, so here's our graph. So that's the first sketch you'd sort of be asked to work with. I did want to point out, you'll notice this graph window. So my horizontal axis, my x-axis, runs from negative 10 to 10, and pardon me, my y-axis runs from looks like negative 7 to 7, something like that. So that's if you want to adjust the range. So you'll notice the next window says change the viewing window so that some other stuff happens. So it says x min, x max. Those are minimum and maximum x values. You probably worked that out. Same thing for y. So we're basically just wanting kind of to zoom in, instead of being quite so far out. You'll notice we've got sort of a lot of dead, space up above these guys. In Desmos, to change the window of your graph, you're going to come over here and click on this guy up in the top right corner that looks like a wrench, the graph settings. There's a fair number of things in here. You're not really going to need to worry about most of them. Pretty much all you'll need for this course lives in this section right here, which is x-axis and y-axis. And we can just manually enter, and you'll notice it dynamically adjusts as we go. So I'll do -5, come over here, change this 10 to a 5. Now we're super duper flat, but we still got the empty white space up above our picture. So we want to change the y min to -2. And then we change the y max to a +2. So that fills the space up a little more. If you wanted to zoom in even more, like from -1 to 1 in the vertical sense, you could do that. To get rid of the window, you can just click on the wrench again, and it's gone. Desmos does have kind of a couple of neat features that you might find useful. If you're looking for, say, where a graph crosses the x or the y-axis, you may have noticed this in those previous video about this. It kind of flags out the points. So we've got we cross the x-axis at -0.40. Our y-intercept looks like 0.222. It's a bunch of repeating 2's. It also kind of flags out spaces where the graph has like a peak or a valley, so to speak. That's actually kind of a low point, for the graph. This guy over here is a high point, a maximum, if you will. So that's one graphical tool you can use. So it turns out you may also have a graphing calculator in the Texas Instruments vein. A TI-83 or 84 is sort of what I tend to expect to see students have. So I wanted to take a look at how we could graph things using that as well. So I'm going to pop up my software that lets me take a look at one of these guys. So that should look like your standard TI-83 window. So pop this guy up. It normally doesn't start on this screen. I kind of forgot to get back to the main. So if you were sitting on the main screen and you were wanting to do some graphing, we'd get started by popping up here to this button in the top left that says y equals. That puts us in what we would call the function editor. So we're going to be able to graph stuff. All right, so let's put in this exact same function. So we've got 5x plus 2. Some TI calculators will do the fancy pretty print thing where it actually creates like a nice looking fraction. The TI-83 models generally don't in my experience. So yeah, do be careful. Make sure to enclose top and bottom in parentheses. I didn't have to do that in Desmos because it generated the fraction for me, which was kind of nice. But anyway, so we have x squared plus 9. Then I close my parentheses up. It'll kind of wrap around. That's okay. It happens. Nothing broke. And now, once we've got our graph sketched, if we want to do it, we hit that button labeled graph. You will notice on the calculator screen it is way less efficient. Desmos kind of spaced things out for us nicely because it had like a big old full screen instead of this kind of like tiny calculator display. So you'd probably want to zoom in on that. It might be hard to get useful information out of this particular graph. Now, to change the range of your graph variables on a calculator, you're going to want to come to this guy here that says window. So I'll hit window, and now you'll notice this is where the Xmin and Xmax stuff that's mentioned in the notes ends up coming from, because that's exactly how they're labeled here. So let's change this guy to a -5, change this guy to a +5. The Ymin we wanted to be -2, and the Ymax will be +2. And these extra spots that I skipped over, that's the X scale and Y scale. That's how often the calculator will generate tick marks along the axes. You may want to shift that for some reason, especially if you're dealing with really large numbers. Having a tick mark every single digit, if you're looking at like X values ranging from 0 to 1,000, it's not going to be terribly useful, right? Anyway, once you've got these things adjusted the way you like, don't hit enter. Just hit graph again, and it will automatically adjust for you. So now we've got a picture that basically, hews to what we saw Desmos generate. It's a little grainier, because of the sort of the low pixel count on the calculator display. But you can still kind of pick out here. The calculator does have tools for tracking down, intercepts, but you kind of have to dig in on them in order to utilize them effectively. So you can still use the graphing tools. Now, if you were wanting to go back to sort of that big picture window, so you noticed it started from -10 to 10 in each coordinate direction, you could go back into the window screen like we did before and type it in yourself. If you wanted to reset it quickly, in this section labeled zoom, so if you hit the zoom button, it gives you a whole lot of options. You probably won't need most of them in the course. The one we would be interested in is number 6 right here. The zoom standard, you can't just hit number 6 once you're in this window. But if we hit that guy, it'll reset things to sort of that default -10 to 10 range. So if you're wanting to clean things up quickly, you can do that rather than going in and adjusting a whole bunch of values in the window screen. All right, so you can use Desmos, you can use your graphing calculator. There will come a time later on in the course where the calculator is really going to come in handy. For the stuff we're doing in this first chapter, pretty much any old calculator will do the job. But as far as graphing goes, like I said, you have 2 different tools available to you. So, one thing I did want to point out, where another kind of maybe advantage that Desmos has over the Texas Instruments, setup, is when you're graphing something on a Texas Instruments calculator, when you go into this editor, you notice it's got that, it's called y equals. Everything is assuming you're working with y as a function of x. So if I wanted to put in one of those, linear functions that we saw back in section 1.3, we have to rearrange it so we've solved into that slope-intercept form, or we have to get y by itself at a minimum. So like, for instance, I'm just grabbing one of them. So we have 2/3 times x, we saw -6. So then I can graph that guy, and yeah, so it's not a terribly exciting graph, it's a line, but it gets the point across. Desmos, on the other hand, it's actually a little more flexible on that front, so I'm just going to delete out all of this excess stuff here. And if we were wanting to graph this thing in Desmos, as it turns out, we can actually type it in without having solved for y. So if I just type in the original equation we were working with, 2x minus 3y equals 18. I'm going to have to zoom out a bit because we're still zoomed in super tight. So let's adjust my window values back. -10 to 10 for x, and we'll do the same thing for y. Technically, y didn't start with those same values, but we'll just set it up that way. And hit the wrench to clear it off, and you'll see we get that graph without having to put the work into getting y by itself. It's not much work, but it can come in handy if you're in a pinch. It also does us, sort of the neat favor, like I said, of marking out our y-intercept down below and then the x-intercept right here, so you don't have to go into the calculator and start poking around with tools to identify where these things happen. All right, so those are 2 of the 3 graphing tools I wanted to take a look at in this particular video. I'm going to record another one where we talk about the 3rd tool, which is going to be particularly important for the out-of-class projects you're going to be doing. So keep on watching.